There's been a recent shift in some attitudes around the drive for electric vehicles, which suggests a more cautious approach may be on the horizon. In addition, does your company need a fun squad to make work more interesting? We'll take a look at these and some other topics on Today in Tech. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Behind the big screens, as always, is Chris. Hello, sir.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Hey, just wanted to bring up one quick point. The summertime is almost here. It's getting warmer outside. The office is getting warmer. I don't think they've had the AC on full yet. So I don't know. The last couple of episodes, I've been wearing sort of regular, boring ass shirts, and so I wanted to ask your opinion. Like, are these okay? Should I get something more colorful? I know that you were talking about t-shirts with me at one point, but I just don't feel comfortable in t-shirts. Unlike the hoodies, which is my normal sort of.
Well, you're asking my opinion?
Yeah, I mean, you look awesome in t-shirts because you know you're athletic guy, and me, I'm just a big blob.
No, hardly athletic. No, yeah, I mean, I don't know. So you just try whatever works.
I don't know. I'm thinking about t-shirts, but I'm looking for suggestions if anybody's open to figuring out. This shirt is probably, it's a comfortable shirt, but it just feels boring on the screen. So I am looking for suggestions on some wear that's not a hoodie, because the hoodies are just way too heavy for the summertime months. So you may not be seeing hoodies until September. Just an FYI. Cool. I know you could care less. But anyway, all right, let's get into some of the news that's been happening recently. We haven't talked about electric vehicles recently or after a few weeks, but there were some interesting news. There was a really cool article in the Wall Street Journal by Christopher Mims. He writes a lot about EVs, and what he did was he took one of the newest long-range electric vehicles on a trip from New York City up to Montreal. It's about 1,000 miles between, maybe around, I think it's round trip, because it's definitely less than 1,000 miles to get from New York to Montreal. But round trip would probably be about 1,000 miles. And so there is an article that talks about his experience there. But then this week he wrote about some of the reasons why the EV kind of drive. Yeah, why America isn't ready for the EV takeover. And this was a really fascinating article. And it's stuff that we've been talking about before. It did feel like a lot of electric vehicle pushes were just buy the vehicle and we'll figure everything else out, right, Chris? It was always like, buy an EV, don't buy a hybrid. You know, just get an EV and we'll figure out everything, and your life will be miserable or your life will be so great because you'll be saving the planet. And what we've tried to point out is that the infrastructure is not ready. Charging takes a long time. You have to sort of refigure out where you're going to go. And in this article, this is what Christopher Mims was sort of experiencing. So I want to go through some of the points that he was making in the article. Is that okay? I mean, you want to just jump in?
Yeah, no, that's fine. So let me get this straight. So he, this writer from Wall Street Journal, decided to take 1,000 mile.
Yeah, he said it was about 1,000 miles round trip.
And an EV, because he's test driving a long range EV, right?
Yeah, it was a Lucid Air Grand touring vehicle, which of course costs $138,000.
Oh, that's nothing.
It's those new longer range ones. The ones that you and I are going to get are not going to give that kind of long range.
Right. So he took this out for a drive on this trip, and I guess what he found out was it's not that great.
Well, I guess he had to. Yeah, I mean, he had to change some of his expectations, and he sort of did a roundup in the latest article about what needs to sort of happen in order for the world to sort of advance into this world of EVs.
And it was a lot of what, like infrastructure.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm going to go through each of his points. The first one was that EV makers need to level with drivers about the true range of vehicles, bringing up this idea of range anxiety that a lot of people have. So, you know, the EPA and they're doing the testing of the electric vehicles that show you how many miles you can go before you need a recharge, and the numbers that happen on the sticker or whatever numbers they put is usually lower. Yeah. And we experienced this with like router speeds in the networking world. It was always like, oh, you know, a 10 gig router will give you 10 gigs, and it's like, no, that's a theoretical number. Yeah, and I think most people now understand that too.
I mean, we do get it today with just regular gas-powered cars with EPA.
Yeah, your miles per gallon are probably different.
I mean, it'll vary a little bit.
Yeah. But I guess the variance between the numbers in EVs it's a bigger variance than what you get with a gas car.
Oh, apparently it's huge variance.
Yeah, it's in this article. It actually says the big drop in range as much as 30% in like very cold weather. There was another study about that. So, and that gives people range anxiety. If you're driving along and your car says that you've got 200 miles to go, and then all of a sudden it drops from 200 to 50, and then you start looking for places where you need to sort of recharge and things like that. So that was the first big problem. The second one was that America's charging infrastructure is inadequate. Basically, the issue of sort of this range anxiety could go away if America had enough sort of recharging stations. And apparently, so he went up to Canada, and I guess in Montreal they have more charging stations, so it wasn't as bad in terms of trying to recharge a vehicle. He only recharged once overnight, but then he did discover some other charging stations along the way. And again, when you're driving from New York City up to Montreal, I mean, it's one road. It's I-87. It's the Northway, we call it.
Yeah.
Because I grew up in I grew up in upstate New York, so I'm familiar with that highway. There's long stretches where it's just nothing but like country and mountains.
Yeah. I guess, like the question then is like, how do you get wiring?
Well,
up there,
there's exits, and then there's a McDonald's off of one of the exits, because we've taken that trip before.
Yeah.
There are some exits, and they do have gas stations,
right?
Obviously, because there are people that live up there. It's not like you're driving through a 500-mile desert.
Driving in the middle of nowheres.
Yeah, it is driving in the middle of nowhere, but there are still some people that live up there. So that's the second part. Now, he also points out, and this is one of our other stories, that it's the third story on your list there, Chris. General Motors last week did make an arrangement with Tesla to allow those vehicles to tap into the supercharger network. Tesla right now has the biggest range of rechargers. And so starting in 2025, GM is going to start making EVs with the Tesla charge port. Right now, the agreement would allow you to do it, but you'd have to have an adapter if you had a GM car. So you would have to buy an adapter in order to use the Tesla chargers. And then, Tesla also made a deal with Ford last month. So it does feel like that we're moving towards that standard charging adapter, which I believe is good. I mean, obviously, if we got to a point of mass adoption and you had 6 or 7 different chargers, that would be a mess. That would be a complete mess, and
people wouldn't want to deal with that.
No, I wouldn't want to deal with that. Like when I go to a gas station for my car, I want to make sure that I don't have to have an adapter in order to use a gas pump. Like, can you imagine? And again, but I wasn't around in the 1920s and 1930s when a lot of those cars when gas stations were coming up, and I don't think that there was a non-standard way to fill up your gas tank. It always felt like
I think there's always one way. There's a hole for your tank, and here's the nozzle, and it goes in.
Right. Right. But then they did, they did make changes to the door and where you put the gas in.
Right.
Like, I don't have a gas cap anymore on my newest car, which is weird because it automatically closes, opens and closes now. So I don't know if you could siphon gas from my car. Maybe you should try that. Maybe we'll try that one day. Which will
turn into an episode.
This is a skill we're going to need when the apocalypse happens and we all start needing to siphon gas out of cars. This is what every post-apocalyptic TV show does.
Yeah.
They start, one of the scenes is, I've got to fill up my gas tank. All the gas stations are shut down, and so they have to use that siphoning skill. Where you take the rubber hose and you suck the air out and then fill it up. You've seen those, right?
Yeah.
Do you think you could do that these days? I don't even know if I could do it. I don't think I'd be able to.
Yeah, I mean, you can do it. Anybody can do it. It's just you want to have some gasoline go in your mouth.
Of course not. Of course not. I would want to go to a gas station and fill it up the regular way. I'm hoping that we don't actually get to the apocalypse because, again, and I think I've talked about this before, is if the apocalypse happens, they're not going to need podcast hosts.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, I'd be the first one to go under the regime of, all right, well, who do we eat or who do we kick out of the drive?
we live in a period in time where there might be people actually trying to siphon out of a Tesla.
That's true. Can you imagine? Like we're in the apocalypse, and 50% of the cars are electric anyway. Electricity doesn't work, but you're going to still have people trying to get gas out of an electric car.
Honey, get the hose.
That's when if you're part of a tribe, that's how you know who to kick out of the tribe is the person that tries to siphon the gas out of the EV.
Yeah.
All right. They also said, so number 3 on his list was that EVs can have the same kind of software problems as computers and phones because that's basically what they are. So there was a point in his trip where the car that he was driving refused to connect with his iPhone through Apple CarPlay, forcing him to ditch the safer hands-free mode of navigation that he was relying on and then navigate with Waze instead. The only solution he found was to restart the car's infotainment system. And unlike a phone or laptop, there's no button to accomplishment. It took him about a half an hour of fiddling to figure out that changing user profiles would force the Android automotive software running on the car to restart, which solved the connectivity issue.
I mean, look, he could have saved his half hour and just use his phone to navigate home instead of trying to use his infotainment system. I don't know. I'm just going to say.
I know. So
you know what I mean?
So again, the new car that I have has this sort of infotainment system, which is really, they just have Apple CarPlay on it. So when I plug in the USB port to the phone, it automatically kicks in with CarPlay. And so I've had the car for about three months now, and I'm finding that I'm not a big fan of CarPlay, even though I probably should be because I'm an Apple guy. But sometimes you plug it in and it doesn't start Spotify or it doesn't start the music. And then I have to it's almost more distracting for me to try to get the CarPlay to work. Once I get it to work, it's great. I get the map I get the map, I get the music, I get some other things. When a text message comes in, it reads it to me and I can respond with my voice. There are some very nice features of it, but the problem is that there's always sometimes of a glitch if my phone is in an area where it's not connecting automatically. And it does have a lot of problems with Spotify sometimes, which is my music provider of choice. I'm sure it works great with Apple Music. Yeah. So I'm not surprised to hear that a lot of these car systems that have these infotainment systems are having issues. Because again, it's very hard to update the software on those than it is to update sort of the software on your phone. And I think that's how CarPlay updates itself anyway. It updates it through your cell phone, and then when you reconnect, the software is supposed to get better. Like again, that's one of those iOS 17 things that's coming down from WWDC. I don't know if you saw those announcements. You probably didn't watch the whole thing, Chris, right?
I just watched the highlights.
One of the iOS updates was this feature for CarPlay, which would allow multiple users in a car. So if I've got 3 kids, and usually one of them sits in the front seat with me, or not with me. They sit in the passenger side, and then the other 2 are in the back. Now, what we've been doing whenever I'm driving them around somewhere is that the passenger usually plugs in their phone, and then they pick the music, and they've got the Spotify playlist or whatever. And so, sometimes I have to endure listening to Taylor Swift. Other times I have to listen to Broadway show tunes because that's what my oldest daughter listens to. And then my son is all over the map. So the new feature on iOS 17 will allow anybody to sort of connect to CarPlay from their phones wirelessly or through Bluetooth. So it won't be just one person in charge. It'll be like if someone's in the back seat and we set up a rule for, okay, it's your turn, you can now play the music, they could just connect via Bluetooth instead of this wire. So maybe that'll be interesting, but the politics of who's going to be in charge of the music is something, again, you don't have to experience this now, Chris, at some point, but at some point in your life, you will have to deal with this.
I mean,
I can just tell how excited you are about this.
I mean, I'm old school. I stick with the aux cable with the headphone jack thing. So,
Well, and also you're driving that big monster pickup truck. There's but that's a cool infotainment system that you have on yours.
It's not bad.
It's not bad. All right. So then the last one that Christopher Mims brought up in this article was that topping up at an unfamiliar charging station can be tricky. And he was basically talking about he went to a street charging station in Montreal and discovered that he had to download an app and prepay for the electricity that he wanted to use. Cell service was dodgy, and I had to find a better signal to download the app. Had I been unable to find a decent signal, I would have been out of luck. Even once I downloaded the app, the first station I connected with didn't work, which is another issue that comes up. This reminds me of when you're out and about on a road trip and you need money, like you need cash, like going to some of those third-party ATM, those ATM cash machines at a convenience store or something like that.
Yeah.
Those always feel kind of dodgy, not only because those are the ones that usually get the skimmers, where they steal your money, but then also the fees on those things can be, hey, you need $20, it's a $6 fee. And so you try to avoid those too. And I'm wondering if that's what we're going to see in the EV charging space, that as more, it's not just going to be like an official Tesla charging station, or gas stations may start converting some of their their square footage to charging stations. But then, if you're in the backwoods of nowhere, and then, are you going to want to charge from, Joe's charging station?
Well, I mean, it definitely makes you question the reliability of the whole ecosystem, if you think about it, right?
Right.
Because now if you have these third-party apps in order to pay for your charging, okay, well, what happens if your phone is dead?
And I believe that
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
you can't pay for it.
Right.
So how do you, what do you do when an electrical grid goes out? I don't know, during like a storm or something.
Right. What if there was a thunderstorm somewhere and they lost power? Then what do you do?
You're going to turn on your gas powered generator?
Which is why I think
I don't know.
Which is why I think it makes more sense to sort of get to a road of hybrid.
Yeah.
Because then you've got that sort of backup redundancy.
Right.
And for, and that's sort of what Toyota's been preaching. And I know you're a big fan of Toyota because your truck is a Toyota truck, but the CEO of Toyota, whose last name is Toyoda, because it is sort of a family business handed down from generation to generation. But There was a story a couple of weeks ago where some activist shareholders were pushing Toyota to get sort of ousted from the board. And a couple days ago, Toyota, the company, basically reelected him. And the reason they wanted to get rid of him was because he's been sort of preaching this hybrid approach. Yes, we are going to make EV cars. Yes, we're going to get to that world.
They wanted him to go full EV.
They wanted him to go full EV, and, don't even think about hybrids anymore. And a more cautious approach has been let's go to hybrid, let's push hybrid in areas where infrastructure isn't there yet.
Right.
And it just makes complete sense to me. So I was a little worried because of the whole activism and activist investors and seeing if it was going to succeed. So it was nice to see that he did not get ousted from the board, and that, a cautious approach actually might be a good way to go in this.
Go ahead. Yeah. No, I was just going to say the new Tacoma, the 2024, it's a hybrid.
Yeah.
It's finally switching over to hybrid. And I believe same thing with the 4Runner. I think at some point, either they have already announced the hybrid 4Runner or they haven't, I don't know, but that's probably going to be next. And so I mean, hey, good for Toyota.
Yeah.
Because I think hybrid is the way to go, personally.
Yeah, and again, from my perspective, I've always been a big believer for technology, never to go all in on a technology or all in on something. Even with my all of the vendors that I choose for whatever I'm doing in terms of technology, I choose multiple vendors just because I never know if that company is going to do something really stupid or go out of business or whatever. So it's I don't go all in on Apple like some other people that we've interviewed on this show. There's all these people that believe in the Apple Apple ecosystem. So they have a Mac, they have an iPhone, they have the AirPods, they have a watch, they have Apple TV and all this other stuff. I have, a Mac and the phone, but for headphones, I use a different pair of earbuds. I don't wear the watch. I just don't think that I need a watch at this point. I still use Google. I still use Microsoft on things. So I mix it up. It's almost like the diversification strategy of investing. You're better off by having this sort of, balance. And so that's what I'm thinking in the EV space. I'd rather have something that gives me the option of electric charging, but if that fails, I have the gas backup. And maybe I'm just crazy. Maybe I'm just not.
No, not at all. I mean,
I don't know.
I think you're using what works. You know what I mean? You're using what makes sense for you.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Instead of just, compromising what works for you to use just one brand, you're just using what works.
Right. And I also think that asking questions like this, like, is the infrastructure ready? Do we have charging stations? How will it change? What kind of impact will that have on the grid? Like, I think these are still valid questions. And it's weird to hear people that when I ask questions like that, they get mad at us for like, how dare you be against EVs? And we're not against EVs. What I am against is this, sort of blind push that this is the ultimate answer. And I know you and I have had these discussions as well before about, why does the battery have to be sort of electric lithium-ion battery? Like, why can't we look into fusion cells, hydrogen fusion cells, and some of these other sort of technologies, and ask the same questions? Maybe, I just don't like it when the status quo or the mob decides something that without having people sort of being able to ask questions. But that could be just because I'm an old person now too.
No. I think a lot of people are asking these questions. Like, the huge elephant in the room is the fact of going all electric all at once.
Right.
No more gas.
Right.
That right there is the problem, because we all know anybody with 2 brain cells is just going to say, no, you can't just go all in and shut gasoline off. No,
right.
You can't. What are you trying to do?
Right.
So there's so many things we have to think about: infrastructure, the logisticality behind it, right? Like, how are we going to have 100 people a day charge their vehicles all at once off of the highway? Like, instead of gas stations, what's going to go in place of the gas station? Right.
And I think we've we've done a lot of speculation.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of thinking about, well, maybe it'll be like that rest stop, off of the major highways.
It's going to be a big rest stop. It's going to have to be huge.
It'll be like, those ones that have multiple restaurants and multiple stores. And, you're going to have to, instead of just spending 10 minutes filling up your tank and then maybe getting a bite to eat, you're going to have to spend a whole hour there. Maybe you're going to have to maybe we should build an amusement park somewhere that allows everybody to recharge their phone, or an arcade, something fun.
A mall. There you go.
Yeah, but malls feel old and dead too.
These days, hey, malls can be fun.
What malls are you shopping at that I might not be aware of?
I don't know. We very rarely go to malls.
Listen, it's a secret mall that only a few people can go to. We don't want to spoil it for the rest of them, so we're not telling you.
Well, no, there's Solomon Pond Mall. There's the outlets.
Okay. Well, have you been to a mall lately? They're not that fun.
I mean, couple of years ago.
Okay, yeah, there you go.
All right, to get outside from the pandemic, something like that.
All right, so let's switch gears a little bit and talk about sort of the workplace scenario that we've been following. This is the whole battle between employers and employees, and remote work and come back to office, and hybrid and all that kind of stuff. Actually, today's episode should be called Hybrid, because we're talking about hybrid cars. We're also talking about hybrid work environments. Maybe I'll work that into the headline. An article this week in the Wall Street Journal was talking about, first it was quiet quitting. Now workers are actually facing off with their bosses. There's sort of a backlash against a lot of these back to work mandates. And the main story was about a Gallup poll, which measures employee engagement, basically saying that half of workers are not engaged on the job and they are putting in minimal effort to get by. Employee engagement declined for the second year in a row. There's also a growing share of the workforce that is disengaged or resentful that their needs aren't being met. In some cases, these workers are disgruntled over low pay and long hours, or they've just lost trust in their employers. Some interesting stats in that article and in that survey.
I was actually looking for the actual poll.
Yeah.
I guess they just have some of the numbers here. More than half of U.S. respondents told Gallup that they thought it was a good time to find a job. Yeah. Remote work divide. Yep.
Yeah, that is one of the bigger issues, that the backlash of people that are telling everybody to come back to work and is making people think about whether or not they still want a job there. So that's one aspect of this backlash. But then the Wall Street Journal also last week wrote an article basically with the response asking them about why you might not be returning to the office. And they got hundreds of responses. And some of these responses actually are pretty interesting in terms of...
Do I have that article?
This is the one that says, it's not my responsibility to save the office economy.
Okay. Yeah, I got that.
In fact, I'm going to read that quote to you at some point as well. There were two big quotes that I liked. First was, "It is not my responsibility to save downtown by going back to the office," said Merrick Wright of Miami. "The average worker should not be in charge of something that just costs us time and money." And then another person had said, "Everything from daycare to public transportation, toll roads, fuel and fuel taxes, auto purchases and maintenance, dry cleaners, nail spas, restaurants, clothiers, hairstyles, dog walkers," like he just listed out everything. "They all suffer when people work from home. Mayors and governors and too many managers want people back commuting." And I think we've had this discussion too as well, is like the people that are commuting back to the office, whether it's 3 days a week, 2 days a week, full time. I don't think anybody's been forcing anybody to go back full time yet. Most of these things are 2 to 3 days, but we are spending extra money now. I'm spending more on gas. I'm spending more on maintenance of the car. One of the reasons I got the new car was because it did have better gas mileage than my older car, and so I didn't want to spend as much on gas because gas prices are up and down a lot. And so if you compare me to someone who is not in the office and there are working full time at home, why should I not be compensated a little bit more to help cover those costs? But those discussions, like you start doing that, and then your boss is going to be like, "Well, why are you complaining about how much money you're getting?" But if they can complain about not coming into work, I should be able to complain about coming into work and then not being compensated.
Right.
If I was at a different company.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because I love this job.
I think it goes further than just work. I think this is a cultural issue, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, like you just think that people just don't want to work anymore.
Honestly, yeah. I mean, why bother?
Well, you do have to work to be productive, to get paid, to make money, to buy things.
But are people working?
Well, do you think that this is just sort of a hangover from the pandemic and remote working, or is it something else?
I mean, I've said it a couple times before on the podcast, and it's kind of like everyone got handed candy, and now they're trying to take it away by having us go back.
Right.
And people just don't want.
I think and I've probably brought this up as well with you, is that the real reasons why companies want employees back, it's not about the so-called productivity. It's not about the engagement. I think they throw those words around because they're really hiding the real issue.
I think
the
part
real
of it
issue is that they're paying all this money for rent on these buildings that are empty.
I think it's both. I think it's both.
I think it's higher on the rent in the building, and they have a CFO who walks around the office and goes, "Why am I paying all this money for empty furniture or furniture that's not being used?" Okay,
so then let's say the natural solution to that would be, okay, let's sell off our property. Okay, well,
who's it going to?
That kind of decision, you have to be really certain that you're not going to have anybody who wants to come back in the office. Because if you sell off your property,
right,
and if people want to start to come back, you have no property.
Right.
So you have to make some sort of decision that works. You kind of have to like think ahead.
Well, yeah,
in the future.
There was this discussion about sort of this trend of hot desking and not giving an employee an actual cube or a desk to sit in. But then it becomes, so if you come in, you have to reserve your space, and then that's where your laptop is. But then the next day you come in, you might have to go to a different area, and that was called hoteling, I think, for a while. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We have this thing on our cubes that it has the little QR code, but I don't use that.
I'm trying to remember which article it was that we were looking at today.
Yeah.
It's one of those quotes where someone was asking, it's like, are we working hard, or are we hardly working?
Oh, that was the thing you sent
which
me.
article was it?
No, it wasn't. That was the one we didn't use.
Okay.
Because we couldn't get access to the article because it was behind a paywall.
I mean, yeah, you have to think about it. Like, if you're a manager, right? And you're supposed to manage expectations. You're supposed to manage the performance of your department, right? Are you certain that everybody is working efficiently, pulling their weight?
Yeah, but yeah. But on the other hand, there are ways to not work when you're in the office. There are ways, there are distractions at the office, just like there's distractions at home. It all comes down to whether you trust your employees that they'll get their job done. It's more about, how much do you check in? How much do you communicate with your leaders? And this is why younger employees actually prefer coming into the office, because they can get that mentorship and they can get the direction that they need, right, versus someone maybe who's in their 40s and 50s or older who know what to do and they know how to do it. And, there are certain things when I'm working at home that I have to make sure that I try to avoid. Clicking on the TV and making sure, and then all of a sudden it's an hour later and things like that. You got to make sure you don't do that. You do have to be a little bit more disciplined. But on the other hand, I don't have, people screwing up the microwave and causing a really weird smell in the office, or some of those other distractions that the physical office brings. And again, it comes down to the responsibility of the employee and the responsibility of the employer. But that's boring, and no one wants to hear about that. They'd rather just hear about, come back to work or not, or else. So I'm going to jump to my next story.
All right.
Because this is going to give you some eye rolls. All right. So this is another workplace related article about inside the push to make everyone friends at work. Employees that are worried about a lack of social connection in hybrid offices are trying to organize more fun in workplaces. All right. So this does have sort of a tech angle to it. They realized that in a remote and hybrid world where you have sort of Zoom meetings and it's always scheduled meetings at certain points of time, that there isn't as much bonding or connection that goes on with the employees at an office place. Okay. Yeah. And so the reporters on this story found a bunch of companies that are trying to do more quote unquote fun things. Now, my eyes started to roll when I saw the first picture that was used in this example, and you can bring it down here. And so this will hurt your eyes.
Keith, that must bring back some memories. Back in the day.
I'm annoyed that everybody thinks that the 80s that everybody dressed like that, and it was never the case where anybody dressed. The only place people dressed like that were like music videos and cruises now where people do 80s nights, or you celebrate the 80s by this was not, you weren't walking down the street in those types of clothes, or at least not where I grew up. But again, I was also a teenager and not in my 20s or 30s. But I don't even think the people in the 20s or 30s were wearing that stuff. Again, it's our cultural lens that we look back at and think that everybody was wearing that. Like, not everybody in the 90s was wearing flannel because of Nirvana. It's just this is what we're exposed to. And,
right.
I didn't wear flannel. And I'm usually about 10 years behind on all my trends. Slow. Like I was telling you earlier, I had a mullet in the 90s. I was wearing flannel in the 2000s. So, yeah, that's not how people dressed. Anyway, this was a photo from a company called Digital Turbine in Austin, Texas. They basically are trying to create the Friend Squad. Other companies are staging baking contests, holding bingo games, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The basics of this is what made me think about it. I'm in my, I'm in my over 40s, I'll say. And I think I try to think back when I was younger, when I was in my 20s and I was working, first job out of college, there was never anything that was organized fun. There was never any sort of, like, you had fun, but it was, you found your own friends at work. You sort of did your own things. If you joined the softball team, it was not because there was an HR person who was creating come join the softball team thing. It was more like someone who was on the team was like, hey, you want to play softball? So you made work friendships because you were working so hard, and you became friends that way. So it's weird that there are these corporate rules now about sort of forced fun. And it does feel like companies are now doing this to appeal to those younger workers, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds. And they're not thinking about maybe the people that have families. because, and I was talking to my wife about this recently too, and a lot of the work gatherings that are done are now just done for the employees, and they don't want the families to be there. They don't want, because it's cost more money. But I remember growing up, my parents, they would have work outings, and there was an outing where we went up to the local amusement park and had a big picnic, and they paid for everybody to go to the amusement park, and then they paid for the lunch in this little pavilion, and you could get food there, or you could just spend your own money and grab it from the concession stand. But it does feel like there's not as many sort of group outings with families. It's more about like, you will get along with this coworker or else, or and there's mandatory fun. So I'm a little bugged by the article, and you're less bugged by it because you're getting a different sense of what these companies are trying to achieve, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have to think about it. I mean, right now, today, yeah, this looks weird. Why? Because we're working from home.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons I think maybe these companies are trying to do this, is they're trying to get people to come back into the office.
Exactly. I mean, they have to. They have to. I honestly, I feel like these people are trying to save their company, because maybe they're noticing that, they're getting lower engagement, lower productivity. Maybe the type of industry that they're in requires, social interaction, and they're doing this to try to save their the performance of their company. So I applaud them. I mean, but back in the day, pre-plague, right?
Pre-plague.
We would have these little social gatherings here and there, like, maybe on a Friday it's a beer gathering where we all get
I think one of the HR people once called it Funtastic Friday, which wasn't fantastic.
Whatever, but the idea was, we all got together, we all talked, and we caught up with one another, and we look at it today and it's like, oh, this is ridiculous. This is so corny. This is so cheesy. But it's like, I mean, we used to do this back in the day, no problem.
Yeah.
No problem.
I remember one time they would, during the summer, they would get an ice cream truck to come out.
Yeah.
And you'd get a coupon for a free ice cream bar at like 3:00 on a Friday.
Sure.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think this is more of a result of people not being in the office as much, and they're trying to think of new ways to get people back. Like, here's a quote. This is an interesting quote. This is from the company called Fair Isaac, which is the company behind the FICO score for credit. So this is a quote. "There was a relationship disconnect. A glass of wine over Zoom worked over the pandemic, or the Zoom pizza party were fine ideas, but they didn't connect us enough." So that they're trying to do other types of apps and conversation groups and things like that. So, I mean, I did attend a couple of Zoom party things. Those were weird.
Yeah,
did you have to do that? Because I wasn't here during the pandemic for you guys.
I didn't go to any of them.
But did they have them?
We did have them, yeah. But I opted out because I want to see. And again, this is just me, but I think a lot of people can relate. Is I would rather see people in person, right? Like, if I want to have fun with someone, it's not going to be over Zoom. It's not going to be over Zoom.
Yeah.
It's going to feel like work now because everything's over Zoom. You know what I mean? So I think the approach needs to change. And I think how we're seeing these companies go out there and do these weird, wacky, cheesy things, I'm like, hey, good for them. Good for them for trying,
See, again, I think you're showing sort of your age versus my age. I feel like a lot of these things are eye-rolling, and now you're not Gen Z by any stretch. I mean, you're sort of in that middle.
No, I'm a millennial.
Yeah, so you're a millennial guy. I think you understand the need for that, but I don't think you. I think you need to have it more. You need to have it be more formal than I do. I think that, like, just you and I, we're friends at work. We're sort of work friends.
Right.
But I don't think that, a group gathering is going to make me be friends with anybody else here. I just don't have the time to make any more friends. I have enough. You feel like you should have more friends at work.
Well, no, I just like the interacting with other people face to face instead of a Zoom screen.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it is.
Okay.
I'd rather see people face to face, not.
We do need to decide this on camera whether or not we're work friends now. Like, I think I've now been here now 5 or 6 months with you again.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Because we do go out to lunch every time we're here, like in studio.
But you know,
we eat at lunch, and I don't despise you, and you don't despise me.
Right.
Although sometimes it's hard to tell. Sometimes when we disagree about certain things.
But like now imagine a new, freshly hired employee in a company. Is this person going to be able to interact with other people like face to face? Probably not.
Right.
It's going to make for a very odd work environment.
I do feel bad for any sort of new companies. Like let's say you just graduated college.
Right.
And you're coming into a company, and, work culture for a brand new employee is probably a lot harder now than it was pre-plague, to use your phrase. I think you had some onboarding sort of things that would go on before the whole work at home thing. Now you're coming into a company and you find out that, oh yeah, most of our employees, are remote, and I don't know. I don't. That's a really good question. How do you react in a post-pandemic world in terms of getting a new job?
Just the other day, my wife got a upgraded laptop that she got mailed to her from her company.
Okay.
Right. So she got this laptop in a box, and there was a paper with the instructions of how to set it up, how to sign in your account. Okay. Typically, like for us, we would just come in and see our IT people. And
like if we had a question,
if we had a question, or if there was an issue with one of the steps, right?
Yeah.
You got to start up the operating system. You got to configure all that. And it's just like, okay, to just get handed your new laptop, here's a piece of paper with the instructions, good luck. I mean, obviously you can call them for help.
Yeah.
But don't you think it might be easier to be required to have that individual come into the office that they're working out of?
Yeah.
And be like, hey, all right, here, I'll sit with you. Here, we'll set up your
how far away is the office from where?
It's Boston.
Okay. So it's not too far.
Well, actually,
or it's far enough.
It's Rhode Island. Sorry, it's
okay.
lesser.
Yeah.
It's lesser of a distance. So it's in Rhode Island, and it's just kind of like, it'd be a lot easier if you could just do this like in person. And actually, I had a perfect do you think scenario.
Okay, go ahead. I have another question though for you.
Yeah. Just a couple days ago, I had an issue with my laptop. Actually, I have a couple examples.
You have a lot of issues with your laptop. I have a lot
of, yeah. So
because it's a PC, man.
No. It's a Dell. That's why.
All right.
It's Dell. No. So
there goes our sponsorship.
So for our podcast here, like I'll use my laptop as a media source, right? And I get issues with the headphone jack not going through our mixer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm pulling my hair out. I'm trying to troubleshoot it myself. And usually I'm pretty good at troubleshooting. I troubleshoot all this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was having no luck. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to take this over to the IT guys.
Yep.
Right down the hallway.
Yep.
Boom. Solve the problem, and I'm done.
Yeah.
That's it.
And if we were doing this all remote, we wouldn't have had a show that day.
No, probably not. Because you gotta get queued up into their ticket system. And I'm sure this is the same for a lot of companies.
Yeah.
They have a ticket system, right? So you get queued up, and they'll get to you when you're next in line.
Right.
And they'll shoot you an email. They'll probably do like a remote
So you did an end around
like
by just basically going to see them in person.
Yeah. Well, it was for an episode,
right?
Tech Talk in the studio.
It would have been urgent anyway.
And IT is here 24/7.
Yeah.
Rightfully so.
Yeah.
And good for them, because they can solve cases really quickly. They're on the corporate internet. Like really high speed.
They actually have people here 24/7, or is that just an expression?
It's just an expression.
Okay.
5 days a week.
Yeah.
Or 4 days a week.
Okay.
But they're here.
Yeah.
But it's as simple as taking it and go seeing them and problem solved. Where I think today it's, I hear a lot of people say, oh, it's so convenient for me to work at home. Well, that's great, but once you start having issues with things, it's going to become an issue.
So this actually leads me to the question that I want to ask you. It's a hypothetical. You don't have to answer if you don't want to. But if you had to choose, would you return to a work scenario that was exactly the way it was before the pandemic, or do you think that, or would you prefer to sort of have this hybrid world that we seem to be in?
Hybrid meaning like couple days a week?
Everyone comes in 3 days a week. It's usually probably the middle of the week because we all understand it's Mondays and Fridays are probably going to be working at home. But, and maybe enforce it a little bit more than maybe than people might be doing.
If they mandated for us to come back 5 days a week, I wouldn't have a problem with it. If they didn't mandate, and if I had a choice, I'd say 3 days a week. come
Yeah.
in. And Friday and Monday we work from home because, I mean, typically Fridays and Mondays aren't that busy anyways because that's, it's the week just starting back up. And
I find
Friday
Mondays. I
is
find
the
I'm
week,
busier Mondays than I am on Fridays.
But Fridays is part of the week
I
where
don't get.
things
I don't
wind
get as.
down.
I don't
right?
get as many emails from PR people or and even the people because I'm trying to find people for the show. I just don't get any responses from people on Fridays, and if I don't have things done by Thursday, it's like it's next week that I'm into.
Right.
Which is why I spend Fridays doing other things like for the video show, like some of the shorts and things like that we put on YouTube. So I don't think we should go back to the way it was before. I don't think culturally workers are ready for that or even would want to go back to that. I do feel that there was some benefit of having everybody sort of remote for a while to get to that experience to find out what works for them and what doesn't work for them. But I do think that there are benefits for both, and you just sort of have to work through them all. And it sounds wishy-washy, I know, but like it feels like we're going to be there for a while. And this whole back and forth and pushback, I don't know. I just don't think you should be mandating a lot of this stuff.
Well, here's the thing. I think we're forgetting one key aspect here. Why did we have to work from home?
Well, because there was apparently this virus that was causing a lot of people to get sick. They didn't have a cure. They didn't have a vaccine for it. They didn't have. I mean,
so like, okay, it
was COVID-19,
right?
Yeah.
So it's 2023.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Yeah, but I think I think these companies are afraid that if they start mandating everyone come back in 5 days a week, that people are just going to quit and find like it's not like everybody's mandating this return to office.
No,
there are companies out there that still were like, we're hybrid, we're fine, or we changed our model, we're now fully remote, and we're comfortable with the Zoom meetings, and we're comfortable with the technologies that allow anybody to work from anywhere. And I guess you put it back on the employee to go find a job that you want, or you find the company that you want.
Yeah.
Because again, we're not talking about this is an either or for, every company in the world has to do this. This is why we talk about this on a regular basis.
Right.
Because a company like Disney decides to do the mandate, or Elon Musk decides to do the mandate, and and then the Wall Street Journal then writes about these companies, and it's a back and forth. So I have a feeling we'll be talking about this probably 2 months from now when we're not talking about AI or VR.
I think it's gonna be years and years.
Yeah.
Down the road, it'll be the top subject, one of the top subjects.
All right. So, but more importantly is whether or not I should go into t-shirt mode or just stick with the just better shirts.
Just get short sleeve sweatshirts.
Oh boy. All right. I got to go do some Amazon shopping. So I'm going to kind of wrap up the show today. Is that all right?
Yep.
All right. Good to see you, Chris, as always.
Same here.
That's all the time we have for today's episode. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe. Please subscribe. Add any comments you have below, even if it's just about my fashion. I'm fine. Just comment. And join us every week for new episodes of Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Thanks for watching.